Hello everyone, how are you? I'm Arith and today I'm going to talk about Fjolkyngi, Nordic magic. Fjolkyngi being the term to designate magic in the Old Norse and Icelandic literary sources. However, this video isn't an academic video at all. It is in fact a perception of what Fjolkyngi might stand for. A sort of breaking the word, not to seek its literary meaning, but to seek its essence. So take this video as simply a perception and actually very much based on personal experience this time. So in truth, I am simply sharing with you one of many perceptions towards the world and our interaction with the world. The way we build a relationship with the magical, the mystery, and the supernatural through intuition. So I'm quite certain I will have a bit of a hard time trying to express something that is experienced. I am perfectly aware that much of it may not make any sense without experiencing it. But I know many of you will find some logic in my next few words, I can only hope, especially those whose worldviews are more animistic and their own practices and attempts to build relationships are towards those same worldviews, animistic worldviews. Well then, the term Fjolkyngi isn't easy to describe. There's much more to this term than just a shallow understanding of magic, and contrary to what we read in some modern books about Nordic witchcraft or Nordic magic and books on Ásathrú as well, the term galdra to define magic or express a magical act or art wasn't the most used term. The sources are quite clear. The most used term was Fjolkyngi. And by the use of such a term, an idea more than just magic was expressed. A sort of term that cannot be simply translated into modern words, as it is a term that reflects a deeper cultural understanding of what constitutes the magical or the perception of what is magic in nature and the action to draw that magic and bend it, control it to whichever purpose. The very notion of magic and translation of the word magic is quite difficult to translate into Old Norse language. But we have the word Fjolkyngi, which has much more in it than just an understanding of magic. That makes this word quite unique in Old Norse language, actually. So let's explore this a little bit, shall we? Please. First things first, in many books dealing with contemporary religious manifestations turn to Nordic polytheism, but also blogs, even certain essays and a variety of other sources out there. Sometimes we find that Fjolkyngi is a type of specific magic from Northern Europe, and this idea is actually incorrect. Fjolkyngi has been placed as a term in a list of various magical workings in Northern Europe, like Seidr, Kaldr, Gerningar, Forda du Skapre, etc. And this is a mistake because Fjolkyngi is not a type of magic, but a term that encompasses all magic. And as previously said, Fjolkyngi is the most common and general word you will find to designate magic or sorcery in general in the literary sources. So all the other terms for specific magical works enter in the term Fjolkyngi, because that's the term used in Old Norse literature for magic in general without giving a specific purpose to it. And much like the term Seidr, which often designates old ways or old customs, but in truth it isn't that easy to translate and explain it without having to make an whole essay on it. With the term Fjolkyngi, it is the exact same thing. Fjolkyngi isn't just magic, it is also to possess a lot of knowledge of both the old lore and the old traditions, and the cultural heritage within folk magic. It's not just knowing specific magical arts, but rather being knowledgeable in everything that concerns traditional folk magic. Fjolkyngi is knowledge of magical techniques and knowledge of the beings involved in the workings of magic. Therefore, translating Fjolkyngi as magic, it's quite, well, it isn't quite correct. And the best modern word in English language, at least, is sorcery, actually. The notion of sorcery gets closer to the idea expressed within Fjolkyngi, but still not quite there. If we literally translate the word, even though breaking the word constitutes several problems in translation, from Fjolkyngi we get the translation of much knowledge, or magic, or knowledge of magical arts in general. And Fjolkyngi is someone possessed of magical knowledge. In other words, perhaps we can say that it means possessing deep wisdom or possessing deep knowledge in sorcery. Perhaps the deity that can help us understand this word is Odin. Let's see. There are over 100 names given to Odin in the literary sources, and some of these names have the same prefix as Fjolkyngi, like Fjolnir, something like concealer or sage or wise, the concealer or the much wise. We also find Fjolsvidr, which is also very wise or much wise. So it seems clear that there is an association between the image or the figure of a wise person with that of a sorcerer. So the idea present here doesn't refer to a simple possession or even mastery of theoretical knowledge, but in fact a great deep practical knowledge, something that becomes instinctive, it comes natural. So Fjolkyngi isn't just knowledge of magic, it is not just know-how or theoretical knowledge or even just methodology, but it is actually the practice itself. Fjolkyngi is much more about the relationship created with magic itself, our relationship with it, by putting to practice methods. There may be purely theoretical knowledge and there may be purely practical knowledge, but Fjolkyngi is the junction of the theoretical and the practical that in turn generates unique results according to the relationship that is created between these two realities and us. Therefore, with practice and time and the generation of different results, this knowledge ceases to be either theoretical or practical and becomes intuitive. Theory and methodology ceases to make sense in the practice of magic, and it is at this very moment that the notion of Fjolkyngi is constructed. Fjolkyngi involves observing the surrounding circumstances and understanding where they ultimately came from, and then what elements could be moved in order to expose them and make them manifest themselves. And thus it is possible to conduct this manifestation to manifest other events. It is the observance of what surrounds us, obtaining a meaning that is not immediately perceptible purely by looking, but this meaning is obtained by transforming the elementary into something whose meaning will come to be understood. Why something manifests itself in the way that it manifests, and understand the source of that manifestation so that we can have better and greater control over that understanding and make it manifest in the ways that we want. It is not just having the knowledge that something specific is good for this or that, and therefore we apply it as a solution for something, but it is instead the understanding of what is around us and what is needed in the circumstances that are taking place at that moment. What is needed or even demanded on that particular moment. As an example, Fjolkyngi isn't the knowledge of a particular plant and its effects, and such effects are particularly useful in a given situation, but instead it is knowing what is necessary to do in any random situation that presents itself to us. knowing what to do, not by theory, method, or practice, but by the observance of the circumstances, we get meaning, and that meaning becomes knowledge. And we put to practice that knowledge. Fjolkyngi is then a state where knowledge is mixed with intuition. So it is a form of contemplation. This is where I wanted to get, actually. Fjolkyngi is contemplation, the observance and transforming intuition into meaning, and meaning into knowledge. I understand that this might sound a little bit confusing, or perhaps even absolute gibberish. However, this is the essence of traditional folk magic. This is the essence of witchcraft. This is the essence of practical action to build a relationship with what surrounds us. This is the essence of an animistic worldview. And Fjolkyngi reflects this within pre-Christian Scandinavian societies. For instance, Norse mythology is absolutely filled with invisible populations, such as Dwergar, Olfar, Jotnar, Traugr, etc., with whom people had interactions or avoided interactions, of course. But the point here is that a type of relationship was created, and that relationship was very much pragmatic. A practical action was required with an intended effect to either cause a beneficial relationship with other than human persons, or to create a symbiotic relationship with such persons of the world or entities, or to prevent disaster, misfortune, and even death by taking action to protect oneself against such invisible populations. For instance, I always like to give this example, which is one of the most common, I think, and still very much used nowadays because it has survived within many folk traditions all over the world. A particular entity we usually understand to be an elf, as a general term, may cause unwanted disaster, disease, and even death within the human community. So the human person is forced to build a relationship towards this particular elf person. Methodology and theory are good for nothing in this case, because this particular elf person does not act according to general knowledge about elves, does not act as we might expect based on a general folkloric idea of elves. This is a singular entity with its own personality, its own individuality. It is there on that particular place, on that moment, acting on its own accord, doing whatever it wants to do. The human person has to rely on the observance of behavior and the cause of the effects and what leads to these effects. Understand the source of the manifestations and do something about it. By this observance, a meaning is created, and this meaning is transformed into knowledge, and knowledge put to practice to try to solve this particular problem. So perhaps the intuitive action is to gift to this elf a piece of food, placing the food outside, away from the domestic environment, hoping that this particular elf person takes the food and either goes away for good or stays away for some time, and according to the results, the human person shall see what best course of action is to be taken from there on, trying to avoid disaster, illness, or death from this entity, this elf person. This animistic view and these practical activities were very much part of the daily lives of ancient peoples, and it is also something observable at times in the archaeological record when it comes to the Old Norse people as well. There's a problem in the domestic environment. There's a problem within the household, in the farm, in the surrounding areas, within the community. And the human persons relied on observance to understand the source of any type of manifestation, to understand and know how to act in those particular situations. Because theoretical knowledge of a plant might be useful when the time calls for it, and that particular plant needs to be used for a particular problem, but other events, other manifestations happen all the time. So it is important intuition, observance, acquiring meaning and knowledge in the moment and understand what needs to be done. You may know that a specific plant is good to cure a fever, but for what good is that knowledge if the house is on fire right now, right? That's what I'm trying to explain, and I'm afraid back then I used a lot of words and said nothing, or at the very least was starting to get a little bit confusing. But as I said, it's hard to explain something that has no theory nor method, but it is purely by the experience acquired through observance of manifestations in specific moments in the world. So I know you will forgive me, and if not, I will haunt you. I will haunt your house, and you better know how to cook some nice vegan food so I may stop creating havoc and go away. I'm only joking, of course. Perhaps to better illustrate this idea of observance of manifestation in order to find meaning and taking the appropriate action towards that manifestation by the knowledge we have acquired through observance, a common symbology we find in Old Norse mythology might be useful. So let's try to create a simple analogy here of sorts. Fjolkyngi is like weaving a tapestry, or better still, the weaving of events and manifestations create fate, and Fjolkyngi is the knowledge to perceive each single event and manifestation that composes the whole. And by careful observation of what is manifested in the world around us, we know which threads to pull, which threads to patch together, what is needed to make certain threads vibrate in a way that they generate resonance with others and become a symphony, returning to order, and the tapestry goes back to what it was. However, this tapestry is always in motion, always weaving. The loom is always spinning. The tapestry grows. Life flows. And we watch, we observe, trying to capture and understand meanings so that we can act according to the situation around us and fixing things by knowing the source of what affects us directly or indirectly. And so Fjolkyngi is putting to practice the intuitive knowledge. Right, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. You have probably heard the church bells. Well, when you talk about witchcraft, pagan stuff, it's normal that a church will scream in pain. Well, I hope this video was useful and that you may have enjoyed it. And, well, it is what it is. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tack för idag. Thanks for today.